What if your life is just code in a simulation? Can you recognize the real world? Greg Whittle, a skilled but unnoticed left-handed artist, works as a technical support consultant at a small company. He spends his time drawing imaginary worlds on paper and hiding the sketches in his briefcase. His personal life is strained. He's divorced and has infrequent contact with his children. One day during work, his daughter Emily calls to invite him to her graduation. Not wanting to see his ex-wife, Greg asks Emily to reschedule so they can meet alone. While talking to Emily, Greg is interrupted by work calls and a colleague delivering a message from the boss. Frustrated, he realizes his pill pack is empty and the pharmacy won't refill it without a new prescription, worsening his mood. Rushing out, Greg forgets his wallet and heads to his boss's office where he's informed that he is being fired due to repeated mistakes. The news shocks him and he momentarily freezes. When his boss tries to bring him back to reality, Greg reacts impulsively, shoving him, causing the boss to fall and hit his head on the table. Panicked, Greg drags the unconscious body to the window, hooking the boss's shirt onto the handles to hide him behind the curtain, then tells the secretary the boss is unavailable. Greg leaves and goes to a bar to calm his nerves. There, he catches the attention of a mysterious woman named Isabel, who beckons him over, claiming she knows everything about his situation and can help him on one condition. Isabel asks Greg to retrieve a talisman from her ex-boyfriend in the restroom. Unsure of what's happening, Greg does as she asks and returns with the item. When Greg demands to know who she is and how she knows about his boss, Isabel reveals that everything around them is an illusion and only she, Greg, and the ex-boyfriend are real, while the rest are part of a simulation. To prove her claim, Isabel uses her powers to make it look like Greg's boss accidentally fell out of the window, clearing Greg of any suspicion. She advises him to establish an alibi with his co-workers and stay out of sight during the investigation. Greg follows Isabel to a hideout, and they end up at a homeless camp on the city outskirts. By evening, Greg learns that his boss's death has been ruled an accident and there are no suspects. Though he could leave, Greg feels compelled to stay with Isabel and learn more about her. She reveals a new ability. He can light candles with his mind and explains that only people from the real world can do this. During dinner, Greg shares his dreams with Isabel, showing her sketches of a house by the sea and a girl who resembles her. She admits that in another real world, they are together. Meanwhile, Emily asks her brother Arthur to help find their father, but Arthur, tired of Greg's issues, refuses. Greg continues to spend time with Isabel and they visit a roller skating rink. They take golden crystals that amplify their powers, using their minds to cause havoc. Outside, Greg notices a police car passing by with someone resembling him inside and sees two homeless people now standing where he and Isabel had just been. Greg is then arrested and spends several hours in jail. Isabel waits for him outside, and once he is released, they celebrate with a meal. Emily continues searching for Greg, visiting various locations. At a cafe, he realizes he's short on cash, but before he can ask Isabel for help, she suddenly jumps into a stranger's car and drives away. Unaware of Greg's situation, his son spots him in this distressed state. A waiter hands Greg a bag of expired food, and as he's about to eat, Isabel reappears. They share the meal together without addressing her sudden departure. Isabel quickly formulates a new plan, taking Greg to a rundown neighborhood and asking him to wait outside while she purchases yellow crystals. Emily, passing by in a taxi, sees Greg and pleads with him to come home, giving him a photo and her phone number, urging him to call. Isabel, displeased by the encounter, claims Emily isn't real and offers Greg more crystals to help him forget. Greg initially declines, but when a thug appears, he reluctantly uses his powers after consuming the substance, believing he managed to lift the thug's car. The following morning, Greg wakes up at Isabel's camp, but she is nowhere to be found. Gathering his drawings, he decides to reach out to Emily, leaving a message on her answering machine. When he returns, he finds Isabel in tears, worried that he had left her. She implores Greg not to contact Emily again, fearing it might disrupt their reality. To convince him that their world is real, Isabel offers him blue crystals and reveals a device she claims can transport them to the real world, allowing Greg to remember everything. Greg takes the crystals and uses the device, inserting it into his nose. In moments, he awakens in a secret lab, realizing that he and Isabel are actually scientists working on a special project, a memory tank that transports people to a parallel reality. The project's purpose is to make people experience a harsh life so they will better appreciate their ideal world. Now, the scientists need to return to reality, but Greg feels disoriented, unable to remember anything clearly. He struggles to recognize a photo of his daughter, finding no familiarity in it. In this world, he is indeed in a relationship with Isabel. She invites him for a walk through a beautiful city where the living and spirits coexist peacefully. The place feels like paradise to Greg, especially when he sees a palace by the shore that resembles the house in his drawings. Nearby, Isabel shows him an observatory where they can stargaze, but the entire experience feels dreamlike, and Greg can't recall ever being in such a place. While revel in the perfect world, Emily continues searching for her father, determined to help him. Meanwhile, Greg believes he no longer needs help, feeling he has finally found his dream world. A thought visualizer, a device Greg himself invented, although he doesn't remember creating it. The machine projects his thoughts onto a screen, forming colorful images. Their joy is short-lived, as Isabel insists they must return to the simulation to protect the perfect world from the threats that once endangered it. Greg persuades her to stay one more day to enjoy the beautiful world where he feels truly free and happy. They spend the day living life to the fullest, relaxing on a yacht, swimming, strolling through the city, and attending a grand party. At a party, an older man approaches Greg, mentioning that Isabel's research isn't producing the expected results and advises her to reconsider her strategy. He suggests that her device, which is supposed to transport people to the harsh world, is not working correctly. Isabel becomes enraged, but Greg manages to calm her down and resume the celebration. Emily appears in the distance like a ghost, observing everything but unable to reach her father. The following morning, Isabel insists on returning to the simulation to continue her experiment and prove her theory. Greg tries to convince her that they don't need to go back. She could claim success and gain recognition for her methods. During an interview, something goes wrong. Greg's personality seems to split, with one part of him saying unsettling things that alarm his real self. Greg's doubts intensify when he sees Emily's ghost at the party. He chases after her, and when he finally catches up, Emily tells him that the perfect world isn't real. It's a fantasy he created. She reminds Greg that he has 2 children who need him, urging him to choose between them and the illusion of the perfect world. Suddenly, everything begins to blur. People from the simulation appear in the supposed perfect world, chanting loudly, and a crowd pulls Isabel away. To save her, Greg consumes several yellow crystals. Using his enhanced strength to push through the crowd, they manage to escape from the party, but the once perfect world now seems much less idyllic. As the world continues to shift and becomes increasingly dangerous, the scientists struggle to return to the lab and resume their positions. Isabel's assistant activates a device transporting them back to the bleak outskirts of the city. Now, back in the harsh world, they search for the crystal dealer while Isabel tries to get his address. Greg spots his boss alive and surrounded by office staff, but no one explains how this is possible. He pulls Greg away to avoid the police, and they decide to steal a car and drive to the dealer's location. When they find him, Isabel destroys the dealer, hoping he will reawaken in the other reality. Returning to their camp, they plan to use the blue crystals to go back to the paradise world, but they discover there is only one batch left, insufficient for both to transfer together. As the sound of sirens grows nearer, they desperately try to decide what to do. Greg asks Isabel to destroy him so he can escape this world and find freedom. Just then, Emily arrives, rushing to the bridge and calling out to her father. The police pull Emily back to their car, but hearing her voice, Greg changes his mind. He tells Isabel to save herself while he chooses to stay in this world despite its difficulties. Isabel kisses Greg goodbye and walks toward the police to distract them, allowing him to slip away unnoticed. Greg runs through the streets, searching for help and a way out. Eventually, he stumbles upon a sign that reads Safe Harbor, a rehabilitation center for the sick and addicted. He joins a support group but remains silent, unsure of how to begin sharing his story. Finally, Greg takes out a photo of Emily and confesses that he doesn't remember her but wants to believe she is truly his daughter. Months later, Emily waits for her father in a park near the rehab center. Greg approaches with a bouquet, hopeful for a new beginning together. This is where the movie concludes.